Okay, why don't we get started? I think you all know me, but I'm Matthias. I'm the e-learning coordinator. I also do some librarian stuff when the opportunity presents itself. And I'll be covering some things you can do in Canvas to make your courses accessible from the get-go, and then also tools you can use to improve accessibility in existing courses or courses that you are working on. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I've seen variations on this image. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this image has been reproduced and been changed slightly many times, but it's a metaphorical illustration of what we mean by accessibility. The ultimate goal when you're making something accessible, whether it's a physical object like a rampway or something less tangible like a course, is to not just make it so that people who have more challenges with access can catch up or have those impediments or overcome barriers to access. The ultimate goal is to make it so that the course or the object is equally accessible to everybody. So in this case, pretty obviously by removing the solid fence and putting in a chain link one, visibility no longer becomes an issue. Now I'm going to jump over to Canvas. This is the course that I have been teaching this term, or rather this is the spring 2021 version of it. And in this case, I've made my syllabus the landing page. I'm sure for many of you, you've made your modules list the landing page. That isn't really so critical. The first thing I would advise doing in any of your courses to make them friendlier to students is to remove any unnecessary navigation column links. You have the two navigation columns. The one on the left is your account level navigation column, and you can't change that. And then the one just to the right of that is the course level navigation column. All of the objects that have the crossed out I are hidden from your students. But by default, there are far more links visible than the ones I have selected here. To add links to the visible column or to remove them, you want to go to Settings, which is always at the very bottom of that column. And then from there, you go to the Navigation tab. And here you see two groups. There's the group of visible or active links at the top, and then the inactive group at the bottom. Some of these will always be hidden by default, such as the honor lock link. That always lives in the hidden group to begin with. But most will appear as visible by default. To move links between these two groups in either direction, all you have to do is click and drag. And then you would just go to the bottom and click Save. My general advice would be to strip your course down to the absolute bare minimum of links, just in the interest of making giving your students as few opportunities as possible to become lost in the weeds. And by the same token, on my syllabus page, as you can see, I've included a link at the very top that makes it clear where they should actually start doing work. And to do this is very simple. You would just go to the modules list, for example. You would just copy that link. Then you would type what you'd like to type, or you can include a an image, for example, and then highlight that, and then go to the link tool and drop that link in there and click done. The most important thing, I think, when designing pages, at least as far as accessibility goes, is to use the header tools. This will be the same for any type of page. The syllabus is just another page as far as how it's designed or how it's built, as far as that goes, because it uses the same editor. The rich content editor is the same for all pages. Now you'll notice that I've broken this down into paragraphs, and each of these has a header value. So heading 2 or 3 or so on. For screen reading purposes, you always want to start with the highest header available, heading 2. And then if you have a section which is more of a subsection, such as under course description, I have course format, that should always be a lower ranked heading. In this case, it's heading 3. It may not look any different, but for anyone using a screen reader, it will read differently. I'll cycle back to this later in the presentation when I'm looking at a dummy page. I believe most of you know about and use modules, but if you're not using them, I really recommend using them to organize your content either thematically or chronologically. I've seen a lot of instructors who will just use their modules to house files, and that's fine. If you're using Zoom to teach your courses for the most part and you just want to mainly use Canvas as a repository for the course content, that's one way to do it. But if the students are moving through your course in any fashion, if they're actually doing work in Canvas, I recommend organizing your course day by day or week by week into modules. And if you have more questions about that, I can either explain privately or point you towards some resources. Now, why don't we get into some of the tools you can use to improve accessibility? For some time now, we've had a tool called Ally, and this is integrated with Canvas. But until recently, it was not possible to edit a whole course at once. Ally is more of a page-by-page tool. Now, however, we have an alternate version of Ally called Accessibility Report, and that is a default navigation column link. And this gives you an overall snapshot of how accessible your course is. It also is useful because it breaks down what type of content is making up your course and in what proportions. There are a couple of basic tab views. The overview option gives you several ways to break down all of this content, but if you want to see all of it at once, you can click on the Content tab. As you can see, each of these items, these images and PDFs and so on, they've been given a score percentage. And there are only a few items here that are either in the red or the orange. Generally, objects that are in the green are more accessible than not, and there may not be much that you can do to improve the score. So I'm going to focus on the items in the red for this presentation. And to do that, I'm going to go to the Fix Low Scoring Content option here. These are all images or PDFs. Let's take a look at one of the PDFs. I have not yet tried to make a PDF more accessible using this tool, and the difficulty with that is that you need an editable version of that PDF. And all the PDFs that I have used in my courses are from other sources. But if you do have the original, I believe it will offer you some tips on how to do tagging. Yes. Okay. So it will offer you tips on how to tag in a Word version of the PDF. Images are much more straightforward. For this one, I think this was originally a PDF, but for an image file, you would enter a short description. So let's say, let's call this Wikipedia projects infographic. Or if the image is just there to make the page look nice, you would indicate that it's decorative. What I've found is that in the case usually of images that do not make it up to the 90+ mark, it's because there are contrast issues. I am not quite sure what that means, but it's, as far as I know, not something that you can easily fix. So I'm going to skip over that. Now for this other image, I want to show how you would change that in an actual page using the original Ally tool. So I'm going to go back to Overview, and I'm going to go to Content and find the actual page that's located on. And there are a couple of other issues on this page that I'll point out. Correcting images is very easy in this view as well. You'll notice the same little dial icon in the lower left corner of the image. And then you have the same tool for adding a description. This is a place where I used to live up in the Cascades. And here again is an example of how to improve text. We're going to apply heading 2 to those first 2 sections, and because this one is a subsection, we'll do heading 3 for that. Tables may not come up all that often, but there is a way to make them more accessible for screen readers as well. Now I have found that it is actually easiest not to edit the table, not to make it accessible as you are working on it, but to use the accessibility checker instead. So this, when you are in a page edit view, this will appear as a little person icon below the rich content editor view. So it is prompting us to add a caption for this table. Call this states, cities, and capitals. And it also wants us to add header cells. You can add headers to either the first column or the first row or both. And I'm going to add it to the first row. And now, according to Ally, this page is as accessible as it's going to get. And let's go back to accessibility report. So that has only raised the overall score for the course very slightly. I haven't seen enough courses to really tell you what is exactly a good or bad number. One thing to keep in mind is that this will scan your whole course, including not just published content. So if you have a lot of unpublished files, for example, that you haven't worked on, they may make your score look worse than it really is.